Hey Year 11s, we're just going to do some preparation today for writing your next 16 marker. So I'm going to talk you through that this lesson and look at some examples of how a good piece of writing and really support you to make sure you can do the best possible 16 markers. Okay, but as usual, to start off, we can do two quick recap questions. First one is name 3 ways in which mining can have environmental impacts. Okay, so name 3 ways in which mining can have environmental impacts. I think a lot of you should be fairly confident with that and think about previous lessons. Second question is give 2 benefits of unconventional energy sources. So just to remind you, unconventional energy sources are things like tar sands. Okay, so pause the video and then answer those questions. Okay, well done. First 2 questions done. Brilliant. So you might have come up with things like these for your answers. If you weren't too sure, make sure you check your answers and add a little bit of detail. But mining can have environmental impacts in terms of the landscape scarring, so removal of trees, deforestation, anything like that, similar sort of things. We've got oil spills and the pollution of water. So those are 3 examples. You might have had different ones, but those are the sorts of answers that we might be looking for. Second question, so give 2 benefits of unconventional energy sources. Well, they supply an increasing demand for oil. We talked about how population is growing. We talked about our demands for consumerism and for all things oil related. So there's that increasing demand. But it also means an increase for the GDP of the local area. Okay, so people are earning more money. That helps to boost the economy and those sorts of things. Okay, so 2 benefits of unconventional energy sources. Okay, so I said we'd talk about your decision making for Norway and make sure you feel really confident. This is the checklist that you need to think about when you're writing your 16 markers. Okay, so just go through these. Remind yourself of that checklist. This is the same sort of stuff we saw for the Tiger 16 markers. You need to be really explicit with the options. I am choosing option 1, which is blah blah blah. Okay, or I am choosing option 2. Be specific. Then explain the context. Say, obviously this one's not the tar sands, but we think about the context of Norway and its energy use. Okay, so we want to think about that. We want to include a variety of supporting evidence. And that includes, this is something that a few of you didn't do in your 16 markers previously, that includes saying where does that piece of evidence come from. So as you can see from figure 4, blah blah blah. Tell me which figure you've got that information from. Included strong geographical content, so make links. For example, don't just say there's pollution. What kind of pollution, or what are the global impacts, or talk about climate change in detail. Okay, so make sure it's strong geographical content. We want you to evaluate your own options, which is what lots of people did, but then suggest improvements or solutions to what the issues are. That's the bit some people had issues with on the previous one. Explain why you rejected the other options. Many people were doing that well, so well done for that. Explain which reasons were the most significant in making your decisions. This is so important. I know I bang on about significance to you guys, but it is really important that you say, I don't know, the environment is so much more important than the economy because of these reasons, or it is really important that we encourage the economy because that then supports the environment. Talk about the significance of the arguments that you're presenting so that you can justify your decisions adequately. You can just keep it as straightforward as saying the most significant argument is this. Then tell me why it's really significant. Okay. Making links between geographical concepts. Lots of you were able to do that in the most recent one, so that's great. And then explain the scale of the impact. So is it just having a local impact, or is it having a national impact on Norway, or is it having a global impact? Okay, so what are the impacts? All right, so that's your checklist. Come back to this one whenever you're writing it. Look at it. Have I done each of these things? Make sure. Okay, as we saw last lesson, we've got 3 options for Norway. Do they set up set an example to other countries by stopping oil production together? Does Norway use up the existing oil but stop looking for new ones, or do they continue to explore and develop all new oil fields? Okay, so no right or wrong answer for those. Okay, it's just how do you justify those choices. So I asked you for homework to uh, do a table with lots of evidence in each column. Think about those resources that you've been given. Hopefully you've picked out some really strong evidence. Okay, but just working with another group, these are some of the pieces of evidence that we got on our Mentimeter for why, you know, different arguments are strong. So for example, here it says option 2, Norwegians want to start using other sources of energy, or option 1, oil spills can kill fish, so ruins the livelihoods of fishing people. Each of these is a good piece of evidence, the type of thing that we want to be using throughout. Okay. Second one, lots of different bits of evidence here for you guys to have a look at, but do use your own evidence as well. Okay. Alright, so what we want to think about now is how we're going to use that evidence. So try to organize it so that you've got your evidence for option 1, evidence for option 2, and evidence for option 3. Okay, so that you can see what are the arguments on one side and what are the counter arguments. Okay, so try to pick out the evidence you think is really strong for each of those options. Okay, some evidence you'll be able to go, actually, it doesn't really contribute anything, so I'm going to ignore that one. But think about the strongest pieces of evidence and organize them. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to go through your table and maybe highlight in the table, this is the strongest piece of evidence for each one. Okay, so pause the video here and go through your evidence. Find the strongest possible evidence for each of those different options. Okay, so now that we've got our evidence ready and we're ready to write, we're going to go through an example. So this is of our previous work. I've just picked out some good work from students, and I want to talk you through why it makes a good piece of work. So we're going to look at an introduction, then we're going to look at a main, and then we're going to look at the conclusions and think, what are the strengths of this particular answer? Okay. So what I'd like you to do is to read through this introduction. It's like introduction and first kind of point, really. And I want you to think to yourself, well, why does this start to the essay work so well? Okay, so pause the video, read it through, and have a go at thinking about what the strengths are. Okay, so now what I'd like you guys to do is to have a look at the areas that I've picked out, and I'll sort of talk you through what reasons we might think for each of these. Alright, so our first one, first line, the environmental impacts of our tar sands operations are catastrophic. Really strong, clear idea about the direction that this essay is going to take. There's no doubting from the examiner's part that there's going to be any other option apart from this one. Okay, so really strong introduction. They then put in a quote, and quotes are so good to put into your answer. Okay, you don't need to use the whole thing, but use a quote and say where it's come from, because these are people, these are experts in their field. Okay, Rainforest Action Network, really well regarded organization. Use their information to support your arguments. Okay. Then they go on to talk about why their statistics are so important. So the exploitation of forests and sacred lands have caused death of 1,600 ducks. Okay, so they're using statistics, but then they go further than that. They then say, why is that important? What's special about that statistic? So they say a statistic which highlights the impact of toxic exposure, and so on. Okay, really strong part of the essay. And then lastly, they think they link it back. Okay, so that final bit just says, many suggest it is overall the worst type of oil for the planet. Okay, so really, again, strong finish to that particular paragraph. Right, so what I would like you guys to do is think about the Norway example and to write your introduction using this as a kind of a basis. Okay, so go through, look at the resources, and see how you can sort of replicate this sort of thing. Okay, So just to remind you, your options are on the board here, and have a go. So you probably want about 5 minutes to write your introduction, really strong introduction, showing your understanding of Norway and its context, but also starting to present your strong arguments. Okay, so again, what I'd like you guys to do is to read through this. This is one of the first main argument that this student is presenting. Okay, so read it through, maybe jot down some information about why it works really well. Okay, so think to yourself as you're reading it through, where is this student making a point? Where they're using evidence? Where they're explaining the geography? And then how do they link it back to the question? You might also think about, can you make any improvements on this? Okay, so have a look through, read it through, pause the video, think about what's best. Okay, so now you have an idea about how to write your main arguments. I want you to have a go at your first paragraph to support your choice. Okay, so when referring to figures, we want to tell the examiner, so you're going to say in figure 1, blah blah blah, supporting evidence. Mention why that's so significant. This is so important because of these reasons. Okay, and in your answer, have a point, some evidence, an explanation, and then a link back to the question. Okay, pause the video, first paragraph to support your choice. Okay, well done. So now you want to do a counter argument. You want to be saying, yeah, all right, I've said this is the option I would choose, but I'm aware that there's some problems. So some criticisms of your own option, or some reasons why other options might be better. Okay, but again, remember, referring to figures, tell the examiner, in figure 1 you can see that blah blah blah. Tell them why it's significant, and then have your point, some evidence, explanation, and a link back. It doesn't have to be in that order. It doesn't strictly have to be PEEL. Okay, you might say, a point, then link back, then some explanation, and then some evidence. Okay, but it's up to you. We're nearly there. Okay, so this is our conclusion. So again, think about a strong piece of writing and why this makes a good conclusion. So read it through, think to yourself, what is it that I like about this, what's good, and how can I replicate this sort of thing. Okay, so pause the video, and then I'll talk you through what you're going to do. Okay, so now I want you to do your final conclusion for your Norway example. So tell them again what the strongest arguments are. Okay, so in here they said, I believe profit can never outweigh human life and safety. Well, that's a really strong conclusion. You're talking about which one is more significant than the other one. Okay, as a conclusion. Right, and she's finished with a quote in her answer, which is also really good. Right, so for the Norway one, conclude your arguments with your strong evidence saying why you've gone for that one overall. Okay, last thing to remember is that the slides that are in the PowerPoint, so not in this video, but the slides in the PowerPoint are all the pieces of evidence that you can use. Okay, so go through that. If you need to go back and find more evidence, remember I mentioned things about quotes. Quotes are really fantastic. If you don't have a quote in there, go back, have a look, and find yourself a quote that can support your arguments. Okay, well done everyone. We'll go through this when we're back at school. See you soon.